What is it, Mike?
Well, I've been trying to run some tests on this sword. You know the one the ninja dropped after I shot him in the face? Using the sonic screwdriver and some of the tech I managed to salvage from your shipwreck. All I keep getting from everything, though, is this flashing red light and the screen saying, Dimension 0, File Forbidden.
That's why I came to this world, to try and avenge the deaths of...
Say that again.
Avenge the deaths...
Of course! How did I forget?
Wait, where are you going? Come back here, you idiot!
Holy crap! Avengers!
Finally, after 5 movies, Marvel has dropped the build-up and we're finally getting down to the nitty-gritty, waiting for the Avengers movie. Is it going to live up to the hype? Well, I don't know. What I do know is that these are iconic characters both in the Marvel universe and in superhero lore in general. However, people who were just introduced through these movies may not appreciate that they each have a backstory that's been decades in the making, most of them reaching back to the 60s or earlier.
So with that in mind, I'd like to start doing a couple of short biographic pieces about each of the original Avengers before the movie comes out. And no, that does not involve Black Widow. She was not an Avenger. I'm sorry, Scarlet. So, who are we going to start out with first? Well, let me give you a hint.
Now, to be honest, I don't think that Tony Stark or Iron Man were that well known up until the Downey Jr. movies, at least not to casual readers. He wasn't quite as much of a household name as Spider-Man or the X-Men, and I chalk that up to lack of a good cartoon show. Okay, lack of a good show in general. Okay, Iron Man didn't have a catchy theme song. Spider-Man does whatever a spider can. But once we had the face of Robert Downey Jr. to put with it, the character became as well known as Spidey and Wolverine in the Marvel Universe. So where did it all start? Well, his final rendition was a product of several comic book powerhouses, which included the great Jack Kirby. But the original idea for the hero is traced back to the man himself, Stan Lee, and in Tales of Suspense number 39, released in March of 1963, the world was introduced to Iron Man, a man who stood for justice, America, and pissing off hippies.
Oh, what, you think I'm kidding? You think I'm exaggerating? Just look at him.
Iron Man is capitalism. He's an industrialist billionaire pioneering the field of military weapons. He essentially works for the government in the blowing things up until Charlie Sheen could snort the rubble department. He's not just working for the man, he is the man. And this premiered in the 60s in a medium almost solely trying to appeal to the youth. The last nail in this coffin, he was based on Howard Hughes. Speaking of Charlie Sheen earlier, Iron Man is kind of an unlikable bastard. Maybe not to the cold extent of characters like Doctor Strange, but yeah, Sheen probably would have made a good pre-accident, and to an extent post-accident Tony Stark. He's a hedonistic billionaire and only stops just short of Sheen levels of absurdity. Usually.
I'm by winning. I win here and I win there. Now what?
Yeah, I could see him saying that. Stan Lee said he considered it a challenge to make what he described as the quintessential capitalist, multiply those traits by 100 and still get the readers of the day to like him. And guess what? They did like him. Heck, I bet even Occupy Wall Street protesters are still Iron Man fans, even if he is the very 1% that they're complaining about. Anyway, Iron Man continued to appear in Tales of Suspense, which was essentially an anthology of sci-fi and fantasy stories, up through issue 100, where the title was changed to Captain America. It wasn't until May of 1968 that he finally started his own comic, The Invincible Iron Man #1. So, what about the character's history? Well, if you've seen the recent movie, it gets the basics right. Genius billionaire Tony Stark is showing off experimental weapons when he's captured and forced to work for a shady group, getting a life-threatening injury in the process that must be held at bay by a magnetically powered chess piece. Of course, this being the height of the Cold War, his captors weren't so much stereotypical terrorists, as they were hilariously racist caricatures of Chinese communists. He has to work with a man named Dr. Yinsen to escape, and builds a suit of power armor to do so in, at which point Iron Man is born. Now it's worth noting that there is some symbolism behind the armor and the chess piece. Lee meant for it to be a manifestation of Stark's emotions. While he may be an invulnerable playboy billionaire on the outside, he's wounded and vulnerable on the inside, much like his superhero alter ego is invulnerable and made of iron on the outside, while having a highly damaged heart on the inside. This flaw usually manifests in severe alcoholism. You thought him shooting up the plates in Iron Man 2 was bad? Oh man, you haven't seen anything. His drinking habits go as far as to put him out of his company and out on the streets more than one time. It's just part of Marvel's history of giving their characters flaws. He has a bionic heart now and no real need for the chest piece, probably symbolizing his drive to quit his drinking habits and to finally recover. Apart from retconning his origin story to the most recent war, very little has to be done as far as changing characters of Tony Stark and his superhero alter ego. That's mainly due to the nature of his powers, and whenever a plot demands a new power, all he has to do is build another suit or upgrade his old suit with the current technology.
Need to save the world from a giant outer space squid whose only weakness is horrible Asian ripoff bands? Well, there's an app for that. Kidding aside though, it's perfectly plausible to think that Tony Stark would continually upgrade his armor as technology progresses, allowing for a very natural way to introduce new powers as they're needed without having to retcon his origin story. Heck, it's a better situation than Batman's utility build as far as plausibility.
I mentioned before that his enemies are hilariously racist, and I meant it. Take his arch-nemesis, the Mandarin. He's a Chinese man who A. knows martial arts, B. just look at him, and C. got his powers from a mystical race of dragon people. That's freaking terrible. And hilarious. But mostly terrible. Iron Man has also never had a female counterpart, which even in the Marvel Universe is kind of a rare thing. The closest thing he ever had to a sidekick was Jim Rhodes, or Rhodey as the films like to call him. Like in the movie, Tony Stark was dying and needed someone else to take the armor. Unlike the movie, however, Stark heals himself by faking his death and going into cryostasis. When he comes out, Rhodes is a little peeved about being deceived into thinking his best friend had just died, and essentially steals the armor to become War Machine. The two have since made up and do work together from time to time. Iron Man's the founder of several superhero organizations, most notably the Avengers and the Illuminati. We'll talk about the latter later, but just know that the Illuminati is essentially a group comprising of all the leaders in the Marvel Universe, including Professor Xavier, Iron Man, and Reed Richards. To be honest, I think that Iron Man represents America just as much as Captain America does. You see, while Captain America is the representation of American ideals, honor, the American dream and all that, Iron Man is the representation of the opposite, American capitalism, which is largely cold and unfeeling, like a machine, probably made of iron.
But whether he's drinking his life away or trying to prove to the world that he's a better person now, Iron Man is probably here to stay as long as capitalism is. With suits varying from his stealth armor to his massive Hulkbuster armor, he's sure to be equipped for any scenario that the Marvel Universe has to throw at him. Unless said scenario is not coming off as a total jerk during a superhero debate. But that's for next time. I'll see you all later.